Welcome back to another episode of My BrainWise Coach. We are so excited that you are choosing to listen in and tune into the content we're going to share with you today. I am, of course, Cole Bastian, one of your hosts of the show, and I'm joined by my co-host, Phil Dixon, and we've got a really exciting topic to share with you. Over the last couple of weeks, we've talked about the neuroscience of trust and when trust gets broken, and then the neuroscience of rebuilding trust. And we had some really positive experience from that. And then this week, we are going to take just a little bit of a detour, or we're going to go in a little bit of a different direction because Phil actually attended a webinar this week and then sent me some of the recording or the summary afterwards that was all around AI and the transformation that's happening within all of our lives as individuals, as well as within the organization or the companies that we work at. And so we're going to talk about the neuroscience of working through or leading through AI transformation. So if you're a business leader, if you're an individual contributor, or you're working from home or whatever it might be, we're going to do our best to talk about, because it can be a scary, it can be fearful. It's also an exciting experience as we navigate what is the future of AI. But we're going to talk about it from that perspective and how to navigate that world, as well as we're going to talk about how some of those strategies that we discuss or tips, BrainWise tips, how those then apply to other parallels in our life when we're going through change or stress, or name the topic there. So we're going to go along that journey today. So we're excited that you've joined us. But before we dive in, Phil, how are things going over in the Dixon house?
As of 20 minutes ago, not very good. Yeah. We have an upgraded kitchen, but however, the brand new refrigerator, and if you want, I won't give you the manufacturer's name, but if anyone wants to send me an email, I'm happy to share it. It's been installed for 5 weeks now, and it died. So the repairman, I just went downstairs literally 5 minutes ago and checked in, and yeah, he said, yep, it's dead. It's going to have to be replaced after 5 weeks.
Jeez.
So it's a first world problem, and I understand that. It's just frustrating.
When you invest money into it.
It was not cheap. The bizarre thing is that the lower section, which is the freezer, actually works. The upper section, which is the fridge, is now just a metal cupboard.
Oh, goodness. I'm laughing with you because you're going to, and hopefully you'll get something out of it, but certainly empathizing with the situation, because it takes so much time now to call the people, get a new one sent. It's just such an inconvenience.
Yeah. And the sad thing is they brought it's very heavy refrigerator, several hundred pounds. They brought it in when all the cardboard was down, protecting the floor. So now one's going to have to go out and another one's going to have to come in.
Hopefully you'll get something free as a part of this experience, considering that the refrigerator did not work more than 5 weeks. You expect it to work several years.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, that's that. That's what's going on. And as we talked, I had both a brain unwise and a brain wise moment yesterday. You've mentioned the brain wise moment, which was I was invited to attend a webinar on AI transformation. And the brain wise part of it is I actually attended and I listened. I was going to blow it off because I had a lot going on. I went, no, let's see what they have to say. So that was a wise thing because it gave me lots of examples about why people are fearful and maybe some ideas about what we can do about it, which is how come we're going to be talking about today. The unwise one was I had a doctor's appointment at 7:45 yesterday morning. And so I was very good. I got up at 6:30 and got myself ready and did all the things I had to do and got there at 7:30 and 15 minutes in advance. I was feeling good about it, only to find out that actually my appointment is not until next Monday. I got the time right.
A+ for that.
But I got the day wrong. What was amazing, and this is the sort of learning out of it, is it was on my calendar absolutely correctly for next Monday. But in my brain, it was the 23rd, not the 27th. And the unwise part was it would have been very easy to have actually checked my calendar. Unwise, our brains do a great job at convincing ourselves we're right, even when it would take just 30 seconds, not even, to actually look it up, go back to the data, and find out you were wrong. So
Right.
the lesson to all of us is measure twice, cut once. Basically,
Right.
if I had gone back and measured the date I should show up, I wouldn't have wasted the time.
Goodness. Maybe you were trying to be brainwise and you're just being early. You
Yeah,
could have camped out and
I did. I did ask whether I could camp out there for 4 days since I was already early, but
right.
somehow they
This week I had a really good week overall. I have been really focused this week on getting the book that I have written in its final form. I got all the approvals back from the quotes that I have used from those that I interviewed, as well as I then went in and made whatever adjustments were needed to those quotes based off that feedback. And then I created the imagery that needed to go throughout the book. So that was really good and had a really good time doing that. And we had a really good chat on Tuesday about all the things that we're working on. We're actually going to talk about a couple of them today. And my husband is running for city council in the town that we live in. So we had a very campaign filled week. So if you are in the Loganville, Georgia area, vote Joseph Baxton. It is not a partisan race. So we're not talking politics here. It's just city council helping our community. But very proud of him. And he had a forum this week, which he did a great job at. And the very exciting part of our collective week, Phil, is that we hit 500 subscribers on YouTube.
500. Yay. And
That's amazing.
I don't know, when we first started this, I said to Cole, if we get one, I'll be happy.
Right.
So we're at 500 now.
We are 524 to be exact as of this morning and climbing. So very exciting. And this is something we want to celebrate with all of our BrainWise friends. So we're going to talk about a contest on what we would like to do to get all of our BrainWise friends, BrainWise listeners, all of you involved in the continuation of this really exciting community of BrainWise friends and listeners that we are currently curating. If you've listened, the premise of the book that we have been talking about, or where a lot of this content, anyways, from the podcast has come from, is a book that Phil wrote many years ago. And within the book, it talks about 5 different principles. And so we're going to give away 5 of these books. So Phil's got it on screen for you if you're watching online. If you're not and you're just listening, it's Understand Your Brain for a Change is the title of it, by Phil Dixon. And we're going to be giving 5 lucky participants the opportunity to win this book. And we're going to send it to you along with a $10 gift card. And the reason for that is we're going to be talking about something we're going to do in the next couple of months that I think you'll all be very excited about. But we are getting you prepared for what is going to be a BrainWise coffee and chat. And the first one's going to happen in December. The way that these 5 BrainWise friends are going to be able to win, Phil, is they have to send us a screenshot that you are currently subscribed to us on YouTube. And then, of course, if you want to send where you're also subscribed to, if it's Spotify or Apple or whatever, that's great. But on YouTube specifically, and then show us one time where you've shared our podcast by using the share button on YouTube and sending the link to whether it was a friend or a colleague or somebody else. Maybe you haven't done it yet, but you're going to do it as a part of the contest. That's totally okay. But send us those 2 screenshots to questions@mybrainwisecoach.com. And we're going to randomly select 5 winners out of that pool of folks that send us in their screenshots. And then once we've selected them, we'll announce it on our podcast. Maybe let's give everyone 3 weeks. We'll check back in and see where we are at that point with the amount of submissions. But 5 BrainWise friends, 5 BrainWise listeners, send us an email with a screenshot of you being subscribed to us on YouTube and sharing our YouTube podcast with one person or many, totally up to you. Send us those 2 pictures, and then we will announce the winners in 3 weeks' time, and then reach out for obviously address to ship you the book and the gift cards.
So that would make it November the 14th, I think, which is a Friday. When we get together on Friday morning, November the 14th, that's when we'll do the random selection.
Absolutely. We will. We'll have our 3 names. We'll say it on the podcast.
Did you say 3 or 5 names?
Oh, 5. I'm losing my brain already. Here we are. Anyways, we're going to send 5 out. Yes, very exciting. So send in your submissions because we would love to hear from you and we would love to be able to send you a copy of the book as well as a $10 gift card. And what the gift card is going to be used for is, and this is a teaser, you're going to hear more about it over the coming weeks, but we are going to start a coffee and chat session, which what that's going to be is maybe 60 minutes, 90 minutes. It'll be entirely free, no charge to you. The only thing we're going to ask is anyone who is attending is subscribed to our YouTube channel. That's the only ask. We don't have any other requirements or requests at this time to attend, but we'll be talking about a topic related to neuroscience. It'll be something that you can share with internally within your companies, within your family or your friend group. There'll be interaction through the chat, music. We'll do a bunch of fun stuff, but we'll be talking about something related to the neuroscience and how it applies to our life as we do during our podcast. And we'll announce the topic as we go along, as well as the date and time of that. So that gift card that you might win will be getting you if you save it until that time frame anyways, your coffee for the coffee and chat with your BrainWise friends. Be staying tuned for that because we're going to have a really good time in bringing our collective community together. And so my BrainWise or unwise moment really from this past week, Phil, is that I always do laundry on the weekends, and I always try to fold every load of laundry as I go, which folding is my most unfavorite part. I don't mind putting it in the washing machine in the dryer, but I don't like to fold it. For some reason, this past week, we hadn't really done laundry for maybe 10 days because we were out of town. So we did it this past weekend, and somehow the laundry did not get folded. The magic laundry fairies didn't come. Something did not happen. And so the laundry sat there from Saturday, Sunday till today, which thankfully there was nothing in there that really mattered if it got wrinkled or not, because we did at least hang things up along the way. But so that was my brain unwise moment, is that I let it sit for 5 days. My brain wise moment was I knew that if I didn't fold it last night and it went into today, which is Friday when we're recording this, that it was going to be like looming over me. I was going to be wanting to get it done. And so I went ahead and did it last night. Celebratory moment. I folded the laundry, wrinkles and all.
So we got to 500. It was a wonderful day.
It was a wonderful day. It was an exciting day. Both of them, I'm pretty sure the 500 subscribers made my day more than folding the laundry. I'll take it as it comes. Oh, goodness. All righty. With that, let's dive into our topic. We teased it a little bit at the beginning of our podcast, which is really the neuroscience of leading or working through AI transformation. And Phil went to a wonderful webinar that was all about this. I've experienced some AI transformation. I've spoke about it at several conferences that I've been at in the past couple of years. Whether you work as an individual contributor within an organization, you're a business leader, you're an executive, or you're just getting into the space of this, AI is going to change the way that all of us across all sectors do our job. And so what we thought is we would get in on the front end and talk to our BrainWise community about the neuroscience behind it and how you can help yourself and others navigate through the change that is inevitably going to be coming for all of us if it hasn't already. And then also how that might parallel to some things we do just in life in general. Phil, are you ready to get started?
Absolutely.
So I'm going to dive in with the first question that I have related to our topic, which is, why does the brain react so strongly to big technological shifts like AI, even when they might promise us progress?
Well, a lot of what we're going to be doing today is actually a review of some of the things we've done in the past, because many of the things we're going to be talking about the impact of AI, for example, those things that we've already covered. And one of the things we've covered is our brains don't tend to like change. In this case, change is both the fact that it's changing, we're not sure what it's meaning. Even one of the panelists yesterday said, we're talking about the impact of change, but I'm actually not sure what AI actually is. If you're a leader or if you're a coworker, one of the things that we recommend is start researching what it is. It's not this big, scary monster that's out there. You can get your arms around it. Trying to mix metaphors there, but monsters is more about October. And just research it, Google it, and find out what it actually is so that you can, at least once you understand what it is, then your brain will start to calm down a little bit. It's all about change. It's all about, if you think as a result of this that you might not have a job, That's the protection part of it, where when we feel like, oh my gosh, I might die. For some people, the conversation is about how do I work with a digital worker? I'm used to being with other people, human workers. And so there's an element of fear attached with that. And then the unpredictability of what's going on. Is my job going to be safe? Is my job going to change? Korn Ferry suggests that 75% of all jobs will go through some level of change over the next 2 years. So let's get our arms around it. Let's change it from scary to neutral. And
Right.
I think that's what our task is today.
I think it is. And I think when we think about change in general, specifically AI in this case, or whatever the change might be, I think the work for all of us to do is create small pockets of predictability in the midst of uncertainty. Because we know we live in uncertainty. We know that things are constantly changing, and AI specifically is going to be rapidly changing over the next forever, quite honestly. I don't think it's ever going to settle in a space where it's not making some kind of evolution. And so, how can you create small pockets of predictability like routine check ins, rituals of reflection, or mindful breathing? Because it reminds you that you are safe enough to learn. You can take the time to do it because you are keeping things somewhat predictable in other parts of your life. I think it's going to be really important on some of the things we've shared over the last number of episodes, Phil, around some of our BrainWise tips and tricks to help us be able to navigate it more successfully.
Yeah.
So, what happens in our brain or in the brain when our sense of identity feels threatened, when the skills or roles that once defined us start to shift?
Yeah, so that's a fascinating question because there's sort of two parts to it. One is what's going on in the brain, and the other is all about identity. And so I'll deal with the second one first. There are a lot of people, and I think it's probably grown over the last couple of decades, where we think of ourselves as our job, as the role we do at work. Step back a moment. You've got an identity in of yourself. It's in this life. You've got consciousness, etc. It's not a one-to-one mapping. So if something changes in your job, your role, or whatever it might be, it doesn't mean that you've become any less attractive or you've changed your demeanor or anything. It hasn't affected you per se. And I may have talked about this at some point in time in the past about how we hang on to our identity. And that is a person I was coaching probably 25 years ago was being outsourced. He was in IT and he was being outsourced. I won't give away any names, but they were taking their whole IT department and they were outsourcing it. There were 210 people or 220 people in the department. A few of them were going to lose their jobs. It was about 5 that were going to lose their jobs. But the rest were going to have the same job. They were going to have the same desk. They were going to have the same manager, the same pay, the same everything. The only thing that was going to change was in those days, the logo on the check that they received every 2 weeks. The gentleman I was coaching was so tied up with his job that he hadn't actually had the courage to tell his wife that he was being laid off, that he was being outsourced. Not laid off, he was being outsourced. And when we talked about it in depth about what was going on, his words were, I think I'm being thrown out of the world's best club. So he was not only in the role, he was a member of a club and was proud to be there and felt like it. So he went home that night and he committed to tell his wife, and he told his wife. Can you guess what she said?
She probably was
She was fine with it. She had one question. Are we getting paid the same amount of money?
yeah.
And then he came back the following day. They had a great conversation that night. He came back the following day and said, it feels like the world's off my shoulders now. We get wrapped up with who we are and we relate to who we are is the job we do. No, you're a human being, not a human doing.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point where you just said where you're a human being and not a human doing is critical because our identity, especially in first world countries for sure, and really probably everywhere, and to some degree, just different stories, our identity lives in the stories that our brain tells us about who we are and why we matter. And for a lot of us, work becomes that story and it creates value, it creates the experience and the feeling of being worthy of something. And when those stories are challenged is when we start to have a sense of identity crisis and what's happening and why it creates fear. But I think it's unlearning to some degree or creating new beliefs about ourselves that our identity is actually rooted in who you are as a human being. For those who, depending on what you might believe, your identity can be rooted in that, it can be rooted in your family. And so it's how do we begin to shift perspective so that way when our work gets challenged or something changes there, which inevitably it's going to, it's how can we, so that doesn't, our identity doesn't get affected by that change. It's because we know our identity is in something else, which I think is the BrainWise tip from this, right? Or this particular conversation is we are more than what we actually do for a company or for ourselves for work. There's so much more that makes us up. And so that is just one small part of who we are, but there's much larger parts. Like for myself, I am Cole, I'm a Christian, I am a husband, I am a son, I love to bake, I'm a dog dad, all these things, I'm a great friend. Those are parts of my identity that are, I haven't even talked about what I do for work, but that's where I am rooted or where my identity is. Doesn't mean that when your work is changing, it doesn't challenge our identity because I'm experiencing it right now as I go through this transition. But what it is teaching me, Phil, is that in the midst of it, my identity has to be rooted in something way more solid than work because work can change.
And I'm going to give a little story of a conversation I had this morning. We, as you all know, we're wrapping up our kitchen, and one of the guys is finalizing the installation of the kitchen cabinets today. And he'd been here yesterday as well. And so when he arrived this morning, we got into conversation. And he said, yeah, I had a great evening last night. I spent time playing with my 15-month-old grandchild and my 4-month-old grandchild. And as he was talking about it, his face changed. He lit up. His voice and tonality changed. And that's his identity now. It isn't the guy who fixes when he puts the cabinets in place. It's a learning, growing grandfather. So
That's so powerful.
It was a lovely moment.
Yeah, I love it. That's awesome. And I think it's as you go along this change and I forming or looking at what your identity is, right? Or maybe what it is rooted in, it's beginning to write down what are other parts of who you are outside of just what you do so that you can begin to look at the list and say, okay, what of these are the most important items to me? And you'll find that your identity is in what's most important to you is in a lot of other things other than just work, but societal pressures, family pressures, friend, all the things, on what do you do? A lot of us lead in with, my name is so-and-so, and this is what I do for work.
Yeah.
And nothing wrong with that, saying no, there's nothing wrong with that, but it should be just a small part of our identity because things are changing so much. And with change comes we just talked about a fear, it comes with threat orientation, the need to feel safe. And so my next question for you is if some of our BrainWise friends are probably leaders in an organization, or they manage a team of people, or maybe they're self-employed, or maybe they're managing their household. And how can leaders use empathy and over-communication to calm fear and build psychological safety during transformation, in particular AI transformation?
Wow, there's a lot of things in there. So empathy, communication. So let's unpack the question a little bit. First of all, empathy, psychological safety. There's been so much research done on psychological safety, and the impact of empathy on that is that if you're as a leader, you're unable to demonstrate empathy about what's going on, then I might suggest you don't be the leader, or at least you get some help in what might be going on. Leaders tend to not communicate when they don't know. And because they're afraid, many leaders don't want to be able to say, I don't know. But what we do know about the brain is the brain wants some prediction. So here's the first tip as a leader. If you don't know what's going to happen, first of all, admit it. Have the humility to admit it. Secondly, make a commitment to when you will find out. So I don't know what's going to go on. I know that there's probably going to be some changes. However, we will be announcing on the 20th of January exactly what we're going to be implementing. So the brain settles down a little bit because now I've got a prediction about when I will know. I don't know
Right.
what it is yet, but I do know the date by which I'll know. And don't make a date and then blow by it without saying something. So creating as much as you can on helping people understand why they're going to be safe. For example, another company that I am aware of at the moment is basically saying, yes, we think we're going to save a lot of effort by implementing some AI activity. What we won't be doing is laying people off. We may pay you the same amount of money, but reduce you from a 5-day work week to a 4-day work week. But everybody will have a job. So tell people what you can tell them to create an element of either, again, go back to protection, participation, and prediction. What can you do to increase people's feelings of protection?
And I think one of the things, Phil, that we talk about when we're communicating, whether it's at work or at home, and we're particularly talking about a change, in this case, let's talk about AI. I think we've always shared that there's three things that happen when we're introduced to change, which is this change feasible? Do I have the time, resources, skills to be able to make the change happen? Will I, as an individual, have to change as a result of it? And then the final one that typically we don't always go to first is, what is the appeal to me of doing this particular change? And I think as a leader, when we're over communicating, starting with the appeal of why AI is going to be good for that particular person, and then helping to mitigate the risk of, is it feasible and will I have to change, as a part of your communication strategy. We say you have to communicate it over and over and over and over again, because it's going to help create different points of connection each time they hear it.
Yeah, there's one change guru says, by the way, multiply what you think you need to communicate by a factor of 20. So it's not do it twice, do it 3 times. It should be part of every opportunity you get. One of the leaders that I knew in the past failed because whenever there was difficulty, he would retreat into his office as opposed to, hey, address it face on.
Being visible, because people need to have that kind of, this is who I'm looking towards, my guiding light that's going to help be the solid foundation to help me navigate this. We just talked a little bit about how do we help people as leaders be able to navigate using empathy over communication and creating a sense of psychological safety. And one of the things we talked about is AI is going to probably create something and opportunities for demonstrating empathy and creating over communicating. Is this feasible? What's the appeal? Are the people going to have to change? And a part of that is learning new skills and maybe even unlearning some things or practices or things that we've done in the past. So why is unlearning often harder than learning something new?
First of all, learning something, it depends on what it is. If it's a skill set of how to put a nut and bolt together or something like that, you're never going to forget that. It's unlearning really means, how do we create something that we've done regularly and do something different? And again, on that webinar yesterday, one of the panelists illustrated it better than I could possibly have invented. And she was describing, so this was at midday yesterday, she was describing in the morning, she'd had a meeting, and I forget what it was about, let's just say it was about marketing. And something had come up, and she said, yeah, let's create a task force to go and investigate that. And 2 of her staff turned around and said, why don't we do it now through ChatGPT? Mm-hmm. And literally 20 seconds later, they had an answer. Right. And she said, it's a habit I have in my brain, which is, we're going to have to go and do a lot of research. Therefore, let's put a team together and they'll come back in a couple of weeks. And she said, right. Nope, my staff already are there. And we had our answer literally 20 seconds, 30 seconds later. And she said, right. So there's a habit that I have to unlearn. It's not difficult once you're there. It's not going to be threatening to change. In fact, it's going to be advantageous. But it's just remembering, hey, I'm getting triggered by that habit.
Right. And I think as AI comes into our workspace, it's a lot of what we do. And this is where it's going to differentiate people, really, quite honestly. My belief is maybe some jobs will be eliminated with the use of AI, but I don't believe the majority are going to be. I think the overwhelming majority, especially if we go over the next 10 years, it's just they're going to change. The job itself is going to change because it's going to require the use of AI to a level that hasn't been needed in the past. And so those who are able to acquire and get jobs and be more competitive in the marketplace are those who know how to use AI. And so in that case, it's not necessarily that you're having to unlearn a bunch of things. It's that you have to learn how to do what you're already doing in a different way using AI. So that's exactly what she just did. That lady on the webinar was talking about, she had to do something that she's always done. Now, in one way, you're going to be doing it differently because it can make you more efficient. And so I think it's going to be really important for us to, especially as we look at ourselves and as we look at who we hire into organizations, curiosity, because curiosity is what's going to, if we remind ourselves, okay, I'm going to do this particular task that I've always done, but how might I do it differently using AI? And if you don't know how to use it, maybe ask the AI tool, how could I use you to do X? And it'll actually probably tell you. But curiosity is going to play a big role. And so let me just ask you, what role does curiosity play in helping the brain move from fear to innovation?
So first of all, curiosity is, if we go back in time, curiosity is a double-edged sword. Because if you were curious, there's an old adage, curiosity killed the cat, right? If you were curious, you were more likely to put yourself at risk and in danger. And maybe that was not a good thing to do.
Right.
On the other hand, being curious meant you'd find new things to eat, new sources of food, maybe a new, better shelter, new ways of doing things which actually improved, etc. Blah, blah. Curiosity is a fundamental characteristic that we all have. The more curious you are, just watch kids. Kids are incredibly curious about everything. In fact, when kids are at the age of 18 months or so are feeling things, this, that, and the other, that's their curious brain reaching out. They're forming millions of new networks and they're learning all the time. So curiosity is a fundamental part of learning. It's a fundamental part of the aha. When people are curious about, I wonder why there's mold on that Petri dish. Voila, we get penicillin. It's that asking question. And you framed the question up just, how can I change my job so that I can leverage AI to an advantage? What do I have to do in order to learn? How and why are very powerful moving forward type questions. And that's the first step, if you like. And then unlearning with the agility to then move on to start doing things slightly differently. And many think, let's say, I love doing woodwork. And I grew up prior to electric drills, for example, right? And prior to handheld circular saws.
Right.
So I'm very well committed to using handheld drills. Yes, hand drills, sawing away. When the electric drill came along, voila, why not? Think of it as I'm now not using a hand drill, I'm using an electric drill. Steve Jobs talked about the Mac as being a bicycle for the mind. And if we start thinking about these are not trying to get in our way, but they're just ways we can use things better. Imagine a carpenter's workshop. It's got all the tools hanging on the wall. What we're doing is hanging another very powerful tool on that wall.
And actually, there's several, because AI is going to be integrated into so many different spaces. So it's not just used to write emails or help us write copy or whatever, but can help us in Excel, especially if you've got a Copilot enabled, or it can help you with reviewing strategic plans or helping you to goal set. It can also coach you on some things if you're struggling in area. It really can begin to help improve efficiencies in a lot of areas of our work life and our personal life. There's so many cool trends where if you're trying to figure out how to spend your money, you're budgeting your money for groceries wisely, you can actually tell ChatGPT, here's my budget, here's the type of food that I like, and it'll put together a meal plan for you and then where to buy the food to be able to spend it within your budget. It's just absolutely fascinating. And it just helps create efficiencies in spaces where maybe we weren't as efficient as we might want to be because we want to do something else. One of the things I think has been a constant theme for all of us in life in general, but then especially as AI continues to come into our space and we begin to interact and work with it and learn it, what's happening neurologically when we are experiencing burnout or overload amid constant change?
First of all, it's exactly the same as chronic stress. Change causes for many. So let's be clear, there's some people actually thrive on change. If you thrive on change, you're probably going to jump out of a helicopter or jump out of a perfectly good plane or something like that as well. But those people who are the extremists in that context, let's put that to one side at the moment. Many people just, the act of change causes stress. And if there's lots of stress going on, they build on top of one another. And so there's a thing, I know we've talked about this before, we call it allostatic load. What is the total load of stress that you're having? So if you're worried about your job and you're worried about what's going on in the world and you're worried about this and you're worried about that, it all builds up. And unfortunately, it does impact many of the processes that are going on in the brain. It impacts it both long term and in short term. Cortisol's around in the brain. Cortisol being around in the brain for a long while tends to make the brain a little less efficient. So you'll feel more tired. But let's flip it over now. Say, okay, well, that's all happening. We know we can explain why it's happening, but what can I do about it? The same things we've talked about as managing stress. Get outside, get up, walk, light exercise, be with other people, laugh, humor. And I know we've talked about having one of our sessions on humor. Humor is immensely powerful for resetting our brains. So all those sorts of things, sleep, manage positivity. If you say gratitude things in the morning or the evening, keep doing that. Identify that special place that we talked about where you've got an image of something that's great. Get out into nature. I know you don't like walking on bare feet in the woods, but it's...
I live with no shoes on. I got to have shoes on, Phil.
But any of those things that we've talked about in the past, they all combine together to manage any of the stress that you can. Again, change what you can. You can actually do the laundry on a Sunday afternoon and fold it. Get into a habit pattern of, and that I wasn't trying to say you should do that, by the way. I was using
I need to.
Things that you can change, that you have control over. Then those are the things to work on. Right. Start investigating. Ask yourself the question is, if I have to change the way I do something at work, what's the worst that's going to happen? Maybe you'll learn something.
I think it's getting used to that and understanding that change is a constant in all of our lives. And for each of us as individuals, identifying what works best for us. Because we've said this before, we're all unique individuals. We all have a unique way of experiencing life. Therefore, there's different tools and tricks that are going to work better for each of us because the constant change is happening. And we want to avoid getting to a place of burnout or overload.
And I just want to jump in at that point. You mentioned sort of personalization. That came up several times in the webinar yesterday. And it was oriented towards leaders, especially leaders who are some level of influence over the transformation that's going on. They said, what people need is personalized treatment because spray and pray, everyone's going to attend a learning session on AI is not the way to do it because we're all different. And therefore, the learning we're going to need has got to be personalized and bespoke to each of us.
And I have my own kind of opinion on helping organizations or us as individuals navigate through AI and understand and learn it, because my belief is it's going to change so fast that AI is in particular in the use of it and its use cases that instead of investing all of these resources on how do you use this particular tool, we should instead begin to help in parallel to that, but really begin to focus on what are the skills that are going to be needed. Curiosity, self-learner, the ability to adapt, the ability to well with change, or whatever the particular skills that we identify as being valuable or more valuable in today's era using AI than maybe they were in the past. How do we help our existing workforce begin to curate and build those particular skills? Because then we can encourage them to go out and learn AI, bring in new tools on their own, and we can use our limited resources to invest in our people in a really positive way that's going to help both the organization and the people within it be able to adopt AI and begin to understand how to use it and integrate it into their daily life.
I think there was an old adage, which is something about fish and fishing.
Yeah. Instead of if you teach a man to fish, to be able to feed himself forever. I can't remember the opposite of it.
Right.
But if you just give him the fish, then you're ultimately not going to help him survive.
There's a corollary to that. If you teach a man to fish, you'll lose him every Sunday for the whole day.
Yeah. Especially if you're a fisherman or if you enjoy that kind of experience. I love it. I think another thing, Phil, is we think about this change is going to be, it's something that all leaders within organizations are going, specifically around AI, they're going to experience it individually as well as helping their teams to navigate it. And this can be paralleled to what we're experiencing in change at home or whatever it might be. So in this case, how does storytelling help teams and individuals reframe what we may experience as fear into possibility?
Storytelling it activates many different parts of the brain. It activates the learning part, the hippocampus. It activates our prefrontal cortex, especially if that story has some nuance and innuendo. It activates part of the brain which is metaphor driven, because a lot of stories are around metaphors. It helps individuals take the story and adapt it for themselves. The learning I get out of a story might be different to the learning you get out of a story. It's like seeing a painting. We all have different interpretations of that same thing. So the story enables us to, if you like, map it to our own experience. It maps it to the experience we have and to the memories that we have and our own threat profile. For example, for me, I don't like hearing stories about medical procedures because it makes me shiver. But I don't like horror stories. But many people do. What I'd actually say to leaders is, yes, use story, use metaphor, but be careful of the type of story you're going to use.
But I think becomes very individualistic in that case sometimes too. I'm not a fan of horror stories, but I've got a friend who is. I'm not sure why you'd be telling a horror story at work, but that's another question to ask yourself.
Many bosses are horror stories in and of themselves.
They are. This is true. You might be experiencing it versus being told the story. But who are you talking to? What is it that makes them tick or what appeals to them? And then adapting your story to fit within that context, I think, is a big part of it too, because then it becomes even more personalized in that setting and helps people to realize, okay, this makes sense. And I can take this part out of the story as I go about my own journey of learning how to use AI or whatever the changes that I'm about to go on.
And what I forgot to add is that when you've got a story, you have to reconfigure that story to your own end. So it doesn't trigger the I'm being told what to do syndrome, because I'm having to interpret it myself. And therefore, I've got some degree of control over that.
We touched on it earlier, but I want to just maybe do a double click on it. With all of this change and all the things that are happening in the advent and the integration of AI into our lives, psychological safety may be somewhat threatened in some spaces for people. And it certainly is an important factor to create or have psychological safety when trying to embark on change or trying to do things differently. So, in that case, why is psychological safety so critical for innovation and creativity in this particular AI era?
Because, again, it's almost like we're taking the same subject and we're looking at it from multiple angles. And psychological safety, if I don't feel psychologically safe, it's very unlikely I'm going to take a risk. Maybe I needed to take that risk, but my brain's going, don't take any more risk. It's bad enough already. But for the company's perspective, we still want to create, we still want to have innovation and creativity, become more efficient and this, that, and the other. So you've got the irresistible force meets the immovable object, where things just smash together and who knows what's going to happen. So everything that we can do if we're we're a leader of a team or a member of a team to create that psychological safety. And in fact, one of the guys said on the panel yesterday, he said something I thought was very profound. And he said, back 5 years ago, and we started to do these Zoom meetings, we all got into the habit of checking in on each other at the beginning. How are you doing? What's going on? He said, maybe we need to resurrect that from 5 years ago, that we actually do a big check-in at the beginning of every meeting to just check what's going on with the temperature and the feelings of the people around.
And I would say that we need to do that regardless of if it's AI is what's being introduced or if it's a Zoom meeting being introduced. To me, that's just a good common practice for us as human beings to check in with one another. Where are we on in life in general, or where are we on this particular subject? Because it allows us to understand how we then need to navigate the next several minutes of the conversation.
It's a very good thing because one of the things it does is it creates a change space. So it enables people's brains to forget what they just came from, and they don't just
Right.
launch straight into the next thing. It's like a temporary respite from actually having
Right.
to have our brains go hard at work.
When we look at all of the skills, I think it's going to be not only are we going to need to create psychological safety, but we're going to, as leaders within this space, but then also a challenge, I think, for leaders or even us as individuals as we go along, what is significant change with the integration of AI is how do we balance compassion with accountability as roles evolve and expectations change? Because all of our roles are going to change and morph as AI becomes a big part of the experience. But then there, we have to have compassion as leaders for the fact that people are going through all of that change. But then there's also going to be at some point a level of accountability to meet certain expectations.
Yeah, balance is the key word there. It's funny because I've been involved in a couple of conversations with a salesman that's doing a lot of selling into the AI world. And he's experiencing two sets of responses. He's the compassionate response and the accountability response. He's getting the compassionate response from CEOs and the accountability response from CFOs and chief operating officers. So in the old terminology, where we used to think of left brain and right brain, I'm going to use that as a metaphor at the moment. And that is we need to balance our left brains and right brains. The right brain's bringing in the compassion and the left brain's bringing in compatibility. And we need to approach it as a both.
Exactly. And I think it's in this space, we can hold people accountable for certain job expectations while also honoring their humanity or honoring that they are going through change. And so you can do both. It doesn't have to be hard nosed one way or the other. And I think a good way to look at it is when you are in your personal life, whether you're married or with your kids, and they do something that hurts your feelings or that isn't in line with expectations or the guardrails or boundaries you put in place, you can love them at the same time of saying that this behavior isn't okay. That's entirely possible for those two things to coexist together. And as people on the receiving side, it's okay, yeah, there are some things that I might need to be doing a little bit differently. And maybe I need to express my needs as an employee in this case to say, I'm having a difficult time with the use of AI in this particular way, or I'm really struggling with learning how to integrate it and still do my job successfully, or whatever it is. But being very honest and transparent about where you are on your own individual journey and expressing that to your leaders so that one, hopefully they demonstrate compassion and understanding or empathy for what you're going through, and they can help you navigate it so that way you can begin to be self-accountable for the results and expectations of you.
And so what I would also say is one of the we talked about curiosity, we talked about mental agility and positive thinking, all those type of things. But one of the things, particularly in regards to AI, is get ahead of the curve. Take one step earlier than your boss in understanding what's going on, how it might impact you, becoming that person that is curious. Curious is the first step, and then actually doing something about it. Be proactive in that rather than reactive for two reasons. One, it will help you understand what's going on. And two, is if you are proactive, you're more likely to be seen as valuable to the company, and therefore they'll keep you. There's many reasons to get ahead of this curve.
And I think that's a good segue into AI is as it reshapes our careers, Phil. I think we're going to have to redefine what success looks like to honor both the human and the technological strengths and then the contributions that both make. So, in your opinion, how do we go about redefining what that success looks like with the integration of these two pieces?
I think you've used the word success. And I think what we've rewarded success in the past, and we should continue doing so. However, success doesn't mean you can rest on your laurels anymore. because success, now something's going to change, and your success of last week is irrelevant because now something's changed. So you're only as good as what you're working on now. So I would, yes, let's keep celebrating our successes, especially the small ones, and recognize that what worked last week may not work this coming week because AI has now learned how to do it. I heard a phrase, we need to learn how to normalize uncertainty. Now, I'm not sure we can do that because the brain just hates uncertainty. But learning to live with it is going to be a requirement for all of us as we roll out over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
And I think when we look at what we were just talking about with the redefining success or what that means, I totally agree that, and I think it's always been somewhat true that we did yesterday becomes somewhat irrelevant because what value are we providing today? Doesn't mean that you as a human being are irrelevant or that your contribution is not important. So I think that's a distinct difference. It's that because things are going to be moving so fast, we have to begin to reframe how we see the contribution that we're making. And I think it's really interesting to just reflect on is that AI is going to take tasks, but it's not going to take meaning. So the deeper question is, what makes my contribution distinctly human? And I believe that answer lies in creativity, empathy, and discernment, capacities born from our social brain. So redefining success means shifting from output to impact, from doing more to deciding better. And in our personal lives, it means valuing presence over performance. When we stop competing with technology and start collaborating with it, we reclaim what only humans can do: connect, interpret, and care. So I think it's a really interesting distinction and gives us some nuggets to think about for ourselves as we go along this journey. How do we redefine, in air quotes, success? Or in this case, instead of looking at output, what is the impact that we're having each day?
And I think that's great. And one of the things that takes us back to is some of the conversations we had in the past about purpose. Because if what we can do is anchor where we're headed next according to our purpose, that actually may be a little easier.
For sure. As we wrap up our conversation today on AI, my last question for you is, if the goal is to build AI fluent and emotionally intelligent teams and lives, honestly, what's the first neural habit you believe will need to change?
The first neural habit that needs to change is our reliance upon habits. Because once we begin, and probably I was being slightly flippant there by,
but that's okay.
So I actually saw a sort of Chinese cookie cracker saying that said, in order to know recursion, you have to know recursion. Anyway, enough of the humor. I think probably it's going to come back to self-awareness. Are we able to step back and recognize those habits that were useful last week, but now may not be useful to us this coming week? By the habits, I also mean the biases, the patterns, all of that big wodge of, that's an English word, all that collection of things that come together. We're going to have to be able to make certain that we can step back and go, which of those are useful moving forward and which do I need to let go of?
I think it's an interesting space to be in for all of us because we all are experiencing the AI change so rapidly. I was just talking to, I can't remember who was on a podcast or where I was at. I was talking to someone about, that I finished my master's in 2022, I think, or maybe it was 21. I think it was 22, right at the beginning or middle of the year. AI was beginning its introduction commercially. It was becoming more widely known, but I hadn't yet been introduced to it. I wish I had, because it would have helped me probably with some of the research that I was doing and made things way more efficient. Then it started literally the next year, it took over. And now it's such a rapid change is really the point, that I think all of us, as we begin to think about what are the things that we need to do differently, it's the habits and the ways that we have done work, right? And the way that we've interacted with technology really in general, even outside of the work context, but even personally. How can we begin to do things different? The habits that we've created, how do we begin to then look at them through a different lens, using AI as the filter in some cases? So I think it's going to be really fascinating along the journey of how all of this is going to change. And not all of it is going to be let's just be honest, it's not all going to be positive for us as employees, as workers. And the pendulum, as they say, will always swing back into balance as we go along this journey. But if we can get on the front end of it and be a part of the integration and its innovation into our workspace, the more better off we're going to be prepared as team members to help the organization navigate what that looks like moving forward. So, Phil, if you think about what we've talked today, the neuroscience of working through or leading through AI transformation, what are a couple of your one or two tidbits or summary of our conversation today for our BrainWise friends as they think about it from their personal and professional life?
Maybe I'd have this imagination of a grid. And along the horizontal bottom, you've got something that says, to what degree do I have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset? And it's a spectrum, right? And if you put more towards the growth mindset, it's probably going to be easier for you. But number one is, how do I move into a growth mindset? And then on the left-hand side, I had this image of my willingness to engage will change. And if it's low, I'm going to have a general tough time. If it's high, it's going to be easier. And so those people that are going to probably be most successful in the future are those with a growth mindset that are willing to try new technology. I don't know whether it helps people or not, but maybe if you imagine that grid, then locate yourself on the grid, and then it gives you an indication of which is going to be the things that you have to learn. Do you have to learn to become more technologically willing to experiment, or do you need to learn how to go build a growth mindset?
I think it's great. And I think for our BrainWise friends, if you find yourself low on either one of those spectrums or either one of those access points, and sit down and start writing out the reasons why you believe or where that's coming from. Is it maybe you're at a point in your career where you're real settled in your space and what you're doing, and that's okay. None of this, of course, that we're pointing out is wrong or is bad for your experience. It's just if you begin to look at it and start to really unpack where it might be coming from, that will help highlight what your path forward might look like to get to where maybe you won't ever be on the far end of the horizontal axis and growth mindset, which is entirely okay. But can you move a couple of points along the journey in a positive direction so that you can begin to adopt this change of AI in a more expeditious fashion, or you're a bit more accepting of it? So I think it's write down where some of those things and those beliefs may be coming from so that you can begin to understand how you then might navigate forward.
And I think if I can pick up on a couple of things, and one is, yes, if you can identify that, and don't try, if you're a 5 on the scale of 1 to 10, don't try and jump to a 10. It's not going to work. But ask the question, if I'm 5 on a growth mindset, what would have to happen for me to move to 6? And just make a gentle step, as you say, because the brain can do that. And one of the things we know about the brain, we love consistency in ourselves. So if we can move from a 5 to a 5.5, then our brain says, actually, we can go to a 7. Take it by small steps.
Yeah, totally. I 100% agree. And I think as you're doing that, a couple of our reflection questions for our BrainWise friends to think and ponder on as you're going through this experience of AI transformation in your life, both personally and professionally, here are a few questions you can add on to your reflection, which is obviously choose one or two that you believe are most pertinent or resonate with you. But where in your work or your life are you clinging to old habits that no longer serve you? What fear might actually be protecting something you value, and how could curiosity help you move through it? If your identity is shifting, what part of your story are you ready to rewrite? I love that question. It's a tongue twister, but it's fabulous.
No kidding.
If your identity, I'm going to say it one more time in case I botched it the first time, but if your identity is shifting, what part of your story are you ready to rewrite? And then how can you bring empathy and over communication into one conversation this week? And where could you practice a small pause, one mindful breath before reacting?
There we go.
So take a moment to reflect on those questions as you go through the week, or the one or two that most resonate with you. And specifically, where are you on this grid or axis of adopting AI? And really, you could probably serve or put in any kind of change in that grid. Quite honestly, Phil, just change the vertical axis to whatever the particular change is. And where is it that might be holding you back from being able to move forward in that? So with that as our episode, it's been a great conversation on the neuroscience of working through or leading through, depending on where you are, or maybe it's leading yourself through the AI transformation, both personally and professionally. Don't forget that we have a contest that we announced early on in our podcast today. 5 of our BrainWise friends will have the chance to win a copy of Phil's book, Understand Your Brain for a Change, and a $10 gift card. We're also going to be scheduling our first BrainWise coffee and chat for the month of December. So we'll be sending information out on that. And in order to win the contest, send us a screenshot of you following us on YouTube and that you shared our podcast channel on YouTube with one or many people in your life, and send it into questions@mybrainwisecoach.com for a chance to win, because we'll be selecting the winners, the 5 winners, in the next 3 weeks. So if you enjoyed today's podcast or any of our podcasts and the conversation and the learnings that you've taken away, always comment, share, subscribe, review, give us 5-star rating on any of the different areas, because it helps others be able to find us and begin to learn the same information and apply it in their lives in the way that you have been able to. And with that, stay curious, stay compassionate, and always stay brainwise. We'll talk to you next week.